how I found out I was pregnant and what happened leading up to that point. So I found out I was pregnant in late April of 2019, this year, and I was actually admitted into hospital a week before that. I had my levels down at the end of the March, just in range, so about 340, I think, was the lowest one that came down to. So in April, at the end of April, it was actually our wedding anniversary, our second year wedding anniversary, and we had planned a trip to Bali for that time to celebrate our anniversary. The week before we were meant to go to Bali, I was admitted into hospital with cellulitis in my leg. For those of you that don't know what cellulitis is, it's a really bad infection. So my leg was very swollen. I was in hospital for about 2.5 days on antibiotic drip. After that, they sent me home. I nearly was not able to go to Bali due to it, but it ended up healing enough that I could go, but I had to take precautions. So I was still on antibiotics for about 2 weeks after that. I got out of hospital on the Tuesday. We were due to fly to Bali on the Sunday. I had to keep it wrapped up, bandaged 24/7. I wasn't allowed to go near any water while I was over there, so it wouldn't get infected. I had creams I had to rub on it every day, and I had to change the dressing like twice a day. So we were able to go in the end, and we did have a fantastic time over there. But due to the medication I was on for the infection and just the general infection itself, it bucketed my levels through the roof. I think my levels, when I came back from Bali, I found out my levels were like 1200. So going from like that 340 right up to 1200 because of the infection I had, which is a big struggle with PKU, is every time you get sick, certain medications can just make your feed just and your levels just rise through the roof. So unfortunately, that's what happened to me the week before we went to Bali. We went to Bali. I did a test before going to Bali because I had a suspicion that I could have been pregnant because we did do the deed near my ovulating date at the end of March. But I thought I'd be fine. Everything. I didn't feel pregnant, but I thought, wait the 2 weeks. I'll do a test before we go, just to be on the safe side. And then it came up negative, that test. But I find that might have been still a little bit early to actually register as a positive. So we went to Bali, and then about 3 days into our trip, my husband actually noticed me acting a little different. I was eating a lot more. I was because I was on so much medication while I was in Bali, I probably wasn't as strict as I should have been while over there. Um, I was still eating like vegetables. I wasn't eating any meat or anything like that. And it's all over in Bali. It's like buffets, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They are quite a high vegetarian country, so there was lots of vegetarian food that I was eating. So I was eating all right. I just wasn't measuring things. I forgot to have my formulas sometimes as well. But I wasn't that worried because we weren't going to start trying to have a baby until a month later. When we got back from Bali, then I could have time to get all my levels back in check once we got back. As it is always a little bit harder to stick to a really strict diet while you're away on holidays. And my dietitians knew that and everything. But unfortunately, 3 days into our trip, my husband noticed that I had been starting to crave things. I was acting a little bit different. I was eating a lot more than I normally would. And he just asked me, "Oh, are you pregnant?" And I said, "No, I can't be. I took a test before we left. It was negative, so I should be fine. Then I just started thinking, and because I had been tracking my period, like I knew I was due to get my period while we were away, I just wasn't sure what day I was meant to get it. So I did have everything with me prepared just in case I got it. So I checked on my OVR app that night, and I looked on there, and I thought, oh, okay, I'm 2 days late. So the next day we decided we'll go get a test just to check again. It could be just anything why you could be late. Wasn't necessarily that I was pregnant because I had already done a test and it was negative. So I thought, nah, I can't be pregnant. I already did the test before we left and it came out negative. We went and got a test the next day. They recommend you take a pregnancy test first thing in the morning because your urine is stronger. So if there was going to be any HCG in your urine, it's stronger in the morning. We didn't get to do it till about maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I thought, no, I'll just do it and see what happens. It came up as positive. It was a very faint positive. So I was thinking, I was in a bit of denial at that stage because I was freaking out. Not that I didn't want to be pregnant. I really wanted kids. I've always wanted to have a family. But because of my infection I currently had, all the medication I was on for that, I knew my levels were going to be through the roof, and I just went straight into panic mode after doing that test. And my husband was like, it'll be okay. Everything will be fine. We'll get another test in the morning and we'll do it first thing in the morning just to double check. That night, he suggested that I contact my dietitian through email. So I sent her an email straight away. I said, I think I might be pregnant. She already knew I was in Bali because I let them know before I left. And then they said, okay, do another test in the morning. If it comes up positive again, this is what I want you to do. And she sent me a big long email of what I was allowed to eat, what I had to do, and everything. So the next morning, we went and got another pregnancy test. Actually have them here. I'll just grab them and I'll show you. So because I was in such denial, I thought, nah, these tests can't be right. They're Balinese tests. How accurate could they really be? So the first one we got was just this little cheap strip one. It's very faint at the moment because it's so old. It's about 6 months old now, but you can just see that little line there. I can focus it. So there's just a little faint line there. It was a bit darker than that when we first did it, but it was still very faint. The next morning we did this one. We got one of these ones, which was a little bit more expensive. Like this one has faded a bit now too because it's also 6 months old. But that one come out just a slightly darker than the little cheap strip. But because I was in such denial, I was like, nah, they're just Balinese tests. They can't be right. I did an Australian one before we left and it was negative. Even though I was in denial and I was in panic mode, I did listen to my dietitian with the email she sent me. So in that email, she stated that if I was pregnant, I also sent her a photo of the 2 pregnancies tests I took over there. And her recommendation was to stick to this diet. And then as soon as I flew back into Australia, which was going to be like 5 days later, I was to go straight to a hospital straight away, take a blood test, get a blood test done to get my levels so they could see where I was at and try to get my levels down as quick as possible. So diet-wise, the first 3 days I had to be on 0 grams of protein. So I was only eating like garden salads. I was having free vegetables. I really had to be strict on what I was eating, which was a little hard over there because everything's pre-made. You don't exactly know what was in it, but I had to guess and try to get the lowest amount of stuff that I possibly could. So I did that for 3 days. I flew back into Cairns, Australia on the Saturday. we went straight in to get a digital color blue pregnancy test because I just said to my husband, I would feel so much better just knowing definitely from an Australian pregnancy test, a digital one, so it would come saying exactly what it was, and I'd feel more at ease doing that. So that's what we did. We went and brought a clear blue digital pregnancy test. From that, it came up as 2 to 3 weeks pregnant. So from then on, I was like, yep, I'm pregnant, no doubt about it now. We then drove from Cairns to Townsville. We stopped in at the Townsville Hospital. I went in there. I told them I have PKU. I'm pregnant. I've been recommended from my dietitians to get a blood test to confirm pregnancy and to get my Phe levels and tyrosine levels. So every time you get a blood test to check your levels, you will get a result for phenylalanine, which is Phe, and then tyrosine, which are the two most important things, not only in pregnancy, but just in general with PKU, you need to have them monitored at all times. But the main one is the phenylalanine levels. So I got those results back in about 2 days. Because they rushed them, my Phe levels came back at 1200. So I was panicking. I emailed my dietitian straight away, let her know, and then she said, okay, for the next 3 days, we want you to only have 2 grams of protein, because they don't recommend having more than 2 to 3 days with 0 grams of protein. Otherwise, you just won't be able to function properly with no protein for a long period of time, and it's not safe for not only yourself, but also for the baby growing inside of you. So I went 3 days with no protein, 2 days, 2 to 3 days, I think it was, on 2 grams of protein. And then I had another blood test. At this point, I already had my annual face-to-face appointment with them, which was in Townsville. So we went there. I got my results back from the second blood test, and my levels had come down in 3 days to 600, which was still very high, but I was surprised how well they had come down in only 3 days. So in those 3 days, I was very strict on what I was eating. So from then on, they were still very concerned though, because at this point I would have been about 4 weeks pregnant. They said the danger zone for getting your levels down is you have to have them down by 6 weeks. That's what they told me, because at 6 weeks the baby's brain starts developing, and that's where the problems can come in if you have high Phe levels. So I was a little bit more calm. I had my husband with me at the appointment, and they said, okay, for the next 3 days, we want you to do 3 grams of protein, have another blood test. So that's what I did. And in that third blood test, my levels came back in range, which I was over the moon about. And every time from then on, when I got my results back, I used this app on my phone, which I'll show you now. It's called My PKU Diet. So I don't know if you can see that. That's what it comes up like. Now on this app, you can record like the food you're eating and all that, but I mainly just use it for my Phe tracker. So on here, you can put in your results of what your phenylalanine levels are. So going right back to when I first found out I was pregnant in April, my levels were 1200. Then my next blood test was 600, and then my third blood test, which was all in about a week and a half of each other, so every 3 days I was having a blood test, they came down to 173. So that was in range, because the range for during pregnancy is 250 to 70. That's the Australian standard Phe levels for maternal PKU. In other countries, it's different. In Australia, they don't have a lot of experience with maternal PKU. There are a lot of ladies in the PKU community that have had babies. There's just not a lot of them compared to countries like America. And I'm pretty sure the highest limit you can be in America is around 600. but don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure. That's just some rumors I've heard. So I use this app a lot. Every week when I get my blood test, I record in there. You can also record the date, your current weight, and what your fee was. So in that first week, that's kind of what happened to me. One of the first things I did after that initial appointment with my metabolic team, I then started seeing a GP. So the hardest thing for me is I live in a very small town, and there's not a lot of knowledge in my town of PKU, especially when it comes to pregnancy with PKU. So when I went to my GP, I gave them all my contacts for my metabolic team so she could get some information and research on it. And she was really lovely. She did a whole heap of blood tests on me, all the normal PKU blood tests, and then also the normal pregnancy blood tests that you get. So at this stage, I was about maybe 4 weeks pregnant, maybe 4.5. And then she gave me an ultrasound appointment to get done because she knew it was going to be high risk due to my medical condition. So she gave me that. So I think I roughly worked out I was going to be about 5 weeks pregnant when I got the ultrasound done. In that first initial ultrasound, they did everything. It was too early to get the dating scan done. So in the dating scan is where you find out your potential due date. It was too early for that at that stage. All they could see in the first ultrasound was just the uterus, the placenta, and where the baby had implanted in that area. So it was still too early to find out my due date. But they did roughly work out that I was about 5.5 weeks pregnant, about 5 weeks and 5 days, I think I was. So they roughly worked it out that I'd be due on the 24th of December. But then when I went, I had to come back in about 3 weeks to get the dating scan done, which at that point I think I was about 9 weeks. And in that one, they did the dating scan, and I got my potential due date as the 29th of December. So it was only about 5 days off of what they estimated at my original ultrasound. But yeah, that's about all I wanted to say in about this video. Just a bit of an intro about me, what PKU is, what maternal PKU is, some of the things that can affect women with maternal PKU. The main one is the developing baby due to high levels. I will be posting another video, which will be first trimester recap, and I'll go into more detail in that one about the symptoms I've had, things that have been a bit different due to my PKU, and more detail about my diet, my levels, things to look out for in your first trimester that happened to me. May not happen to everyone with maternal PKU, but just my personal journey through my first trimester. Thank you for